Welcome to your Construction Safety Association of Manitoba's virtual Toolbox Talk series. Brought to you by CSAM, the Safety Conference, Canada's premier and North America's largest construction safety conference.
Elevated work platforms means several different things. These are devices that allow a worker to do a task at height where a ladder is not reasonable or practical for completing their task. Whether it's working on scaffolding, or in a scissor lift, or on an aerial lift. These are the typical devices frequently used in construction to complete numerous tasks. There are several different types of training required when using each of these different types of platforms. Did you know that a pre-use inspection is required on each of these? That inspection should be documented as verification that it was done. Without a pre-use inspection, hidden defects or deficiencies may cause failure and a worker injury. All equipment must meet the manufacturer standards, so to maintain this standard, a pre-use checklist should be completed as verification. This checklist is part of your due diligence. So let's take a closer look. There are 7 types of scaffolding outlined in Part 28 of the Manitoba Regulation. The most commonly used in construction are single pole, frame, or mobile. All scaffolds should have inspection tags attached to the access points. These tags are generally in 3 colors. Green will identify the scaffold is good to use and there are no hazards. Yellow will identify the scaffold can be used, but be cautious in certain areas as guardrails may be missing, planks may be missing, that kind of thing. Red tags will identify the scaffold should not be used as it is being assembled or dismantled and there are uncontrolled hazards. When used outside, mud sills are required to allow proper weight distribution to prevent the scaffold from sinking into the ground. These sills must be able to take 4 times the maximum weight load of the scaffold as outlined in the manufacturer and engineering specifications. Once mud sills are in place, the screw jacks must be anchored to the sill to prevent any sort of movement. These screw jacks will ensure the scaffold is plumb and level. Now, when a scaffold is being erected, we must take into account the requirement for securement. When a scaffold is 3 sections high and 1 section wide, or if the scaffold is 3 sections long and 1 section high, we must be able to secure it to the building or add outriggers to widen the footprint as an extra secure base.
When installing the planking, we must ensure it is defect-free and has the correct overlap length of 150 to 300 millimeters over the support tube underneath. However, the minimum extension of a plank extending over the end of a scaffold must be a minimum of 300 millimeters.
As single pole or tube and clamp scaffolding is being erected or dismantled, guardrails may be missing. In that case, we want to use our fall protection harness and lanyard on the rosettes. These rosettes are engineered anchors and will allow us to hold that 5,000-pound anchor. When we look at frame scaffolding, these parts are specific and should not be interchanged. We will still use the screw jacks on the ground level to ensure the scaffold is plumb and level. As we build and stack these frames together, we must ensure that the proper security pins are in place to lock each section together. The planks used on scaffolding should have security hooks or a proper overlap as outlined in legislation. If the security hooks are there and they have a locking mechanism, that should be used. While this type of scaffold is being erected, it is recommended that the frame is your anchor point for your fall protection. You never want to tie off to the aluminum cross bracing. This will not support the weight of a worker who happens to fall. The cross brace must be securely locked into position by closing the safety latch over the brace. If this latch is defective, do not use that section of the frame. The cross brace is designed to help the structure be rigid and square. You may be risking a catastrophic failure if you use defective pieces. Also, the cross brace should not be used if it is bent or kinked. This will alter how it fits into the frame, if it fits at all.
When the top level is completed, guardrails must still be assembled to protect the workers from falling. This is generally accomplished by adding another frame section or a half section, depending on the room available at the top. Secure in the 2x4 lumber across the sides, and this will now be your guardrail.
Mobile scaffold, or sometimes referred to as a baker scaffold, is a much smaller unit overall. These scaffolds are designed to allow workers to roll this equipment easily to each task location with minimal effort. So instead of screw jacks at the bottom, they use caster wheels. Now, legislation states in Part 28.20 that unless the surface is flat and clear of obstructions, the worker is secured to an independent structure with fall protection and remains in the confines of the scaffold, it should not be moved with a worker standing on the decking. Sometimes a frame scaffolding is used as a mobile scaffold as well if the baker scaffold will not reach the proper height required. Caster wheels can be added to any frame scaffold, but remember, when the scaffold gets to place where the work is being done, lock the wheels. With the baker scaffold, generally deck planks will act as the bracing between the two side frames, so an aluminum cross brace will not be needed. Be sure that the decking is tight and covers the entire width of the frame. Scissor lifts are designed to elevate the working level where using a ladder or scaffold are not practical. These lifts are designed to only go straight up or down, so the worker should position themselves directly under or as close to the work area as possible without reaching too far beyond the guardrails. When inside the machine, there are numerous approved anchor points. These engineered anchors will support the weight of the worker if the worker falls. As common as we may see it, due to it being easy, we should not tie off to the guardrails. We need to ensure that the back gate or chain is closed to protect us from falling out. Again, avoid shortcuts by strapping the gate open or not latching that chain. In Manitoba Regulation Part 28.39, it discusses the requirement for wearing a harness while inside a scissor lift. However, your company safe drop procedures or the prime contractor site-specific rules may be stricter than this legislation and require a 100% tie-off. This is totally acceptable and reasonable.
We want to be sure that our entry and exit out of the scissor lift is treated just like a ladder. We should be facing the ladder rungs and maintain 3-point contact at all times. Please do not hang off the top bar when exiting and swing out of the platform. By doing this, you are risking an MSI or even a slip upon your feet hitting the ground.
These numbers will identify the width of the deck and the reach height of the lift. You should know what size of equipment you need to complete your job safely. Be sure to understand the weight load of each machine. This can generally be found on the placard located close to the control panel. Remember, we need to take into account the weight load of our tools and or equipment we are bringing into the lift as well. Most machines will also have an extendable deck. When this is used, be sure it is locked into place when extended or retracted. When the deck is extended, be aware of the extra weight load you are putting on there and refer to the placard for guidance.
Be sure that you are properly trained to use each piece of lift equipment, as there are different control panels on different brands. Some will have different push buttons, while others will have toggle switches or even joysticks. Some will have outriggers or stabilizers.
So what do we do if the deck gets stuck in an elevated position and the control panel won't work? You should be aware of the emergency procedures for each unit you are operating. Some will have a base unit control. These will be located close to the floor. Another worker can assist you in lowering the deck from this panel. During your pre-use check, be sure to verify that these control panels are operational in case they are needed. Each scissor lift will have a hydraulic release valve that will slowly lower the deck down in case of an emergency. Be sure that you understand how these control panels will work in case you need to be lowered. Aerial lifts come in a couple different styles. There are telescopic booms and articulating booms. These types of lifts are generally used outdoors and will allow workers to access those hard-to-reach task areas where scaffolding is not a practical option. Now, there are numerous similarities between the scissor lift and an aerial lift. An aerial lift will allow a worker to place the man basket in different locations without moving the base unit. Always be sure to check overhead hazards such as power lines, steel beams, and/or structures, overhang of a building, that kind of stuff. As well, check the ground area to ensure the base unit is not on a slope where there may be a risk of tipping the unit over.
As with the scissor lift, there are several approved anchor points. Again, do not take that shortcut and tie off on the guardrail. With these types of lifts, the Manitoba Regulation Part 28.39 states that a harness with lanyard must be worn at all times. The access point may have a gate or slider bar, and these need to remain closed at all times while workers are within the confines of the basket. These numbers represent the height it will reach. One thing to note, the S indicates a straight stick boom, whereas the Z indicates a articulating boom, because the boom folds up like the letter Z.
Again, workers should ensure they have been properly trained to operate each unit, as the control panels may be different between them. Some of the units may have floor pedals, while others will have two-hand control operation. Be sure you understand these panels and how to use them properly, and don't guess. Guessing causes an unnecessary hazard to yourself and or other workers in and around the basket or the unit. So let's briefly discuss what to do in an emergency situation if you get stuck while elevated or if the basket control panels stop working. Each base unit will have secondary controls. During your pre-use check, the operator should verify these control panels work in order to verify that in an emergency, you can get down safely. Everything will be described by a picture for ease of use. So if an untrained worker needs to assist you in lowering the basket down, they can figure it out quite easily and press the correct button to help you down. As with anything and everything for construction, pre-use checklists are required. This includes the equipment and your harness and lanyard. You can reference CSAM's other virtual toolbox talk on fall protection for a guide on how to properly inspect your harness. Even if you have a rented piece of equipment, you still must inspect it prior to each use to ensure they work as intended by the manufacturer. You should complete a pre-start checklist as verification that this has been done. Include the date, the model number, and the name of the person who is doing that inspection. If you don't have a checklist, you can search online for the manufacturer or contact the rental company to see if they have some that they can supply. Some of the basic things to inspect are the overall condition of the base unit, the wheels, the rails, any hoses or cables, the batteries, and the general operation of the equipment, such as does it drive forward and backwards, and will it stop? Does it go up and down? Is there a warning beacon light? And if so, does that beacon light actually flash? Is there an audible beep while this equipment is in motion? There may be other items on that checklist, but these are some of the most common things to verify. There may be special circumstances or unique hazards when we work on elevated work platforms. First, we need to identify not only the task-specific hazards we will be exposed to, we must also identify the defects on any equipment that we will be using. To communicate the hazards of the work area, we can create a control zone with barricades and signage, warning other workers of our task at height. If all of this falls into place properly and we've received appropriate training, our equipment is operational, we have now controlled our work environment. So make sure that you have done everything reasonable and practicable to ensure that your equipment that you are using is in good condition and you are properly trained to use it. Be sure to check out CSAM's other virtual toolbox talks. Stay safe out there.